Welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper. My name is Bradley Martin, Dr. Bradley Martin, and I'm excited that you are joining us again. I will be your host for this new study that we are beginning. If this is your first time joining us, I would like to say welcome. We have done several Bible studies that you can go back and look at the episodes of those on our social media platforms and podcast platforms that you so choose to do that. But we are beginning a new study today. And let me just give you a little bit of background about where this is coming from and where I hope this goes. I had sort of in my preparation for looking at what we were going to do next in our study, I was praying about that and not to be really hokey pokey about it or whatever. God just laid this on my heart to do. And so, given the day and time and culture that we live in right now, I think it is very appropriate to look at this subject and to talk a little bit about this. I didn't know if this would turn into a Bible study or a book or something that I would do. I'm kind of thinking it's going to do both. And so what I have decided to do through prayer and through my studying this is kind of go through this and kind of write a little bit as I do this. And so hopefully it is my desire that this will come out in book form eventually so that you can go back and look at that and use this for the future. So it may not look exactly about what we're talking about now, as all projects do. You kind of start off and you edit and stuff, but this is kind of raw. This is kind of the first version of that. So you are getting in on it on the ground floor. So I appreciate you jumping in with us in this. And in actuality, you are helping me to come up with this project as we move forward. So I'll probably have to pay some of you royalties for that, but that's okay. We'll move forward in that going forward. But just let me remind you that this is always an opportunity for you to ask questions. I know we're not doing this live per se, but you can leave comments, you can text or email or any of that kind of stuff. I'm not 100% the expert on this. I'm studying through it as I hope you are in your Bible and your time together. But I wanted to get this out while it's fresh on my mind. And so there are some things that I'm studying through that we're going to look at. We're going to, as you can see on the screen in front of you, it's mainly going to center around 1 Corinthians, and that's 13. I'm not really sure why I put 15 there, but that's a mistake. So it's going to be 1 Corinthians 13. And maybe I can change that. I'll change it later. But we're going to look at 1 Corinthians 13, which we call the love chapter. I've heard it used in several weddings and whatever, and I'll explain a little bit why I think some of the things we've done are a little bit out of context in that. But I wanted to just start this off by saying I appreciate you joining us up again. I'm not sure how many weeks this is going to be. We're just going to kind of float through it and see how God leads us through the Holy Spirit in this. But given the time that we live in, I think it's very important for us to take a step back and look at some things from a Christian, from a biblical perspective, from a God perspective, instead of looking at everything about how we are passionate about politically or passionate about whatever else it may be. So that's kind of where we're at. This will not be political. This will not be nationalistic. This will not be anything but grounded in the Bible, in God's word. And so I will mention some things that are political, but I'm not going, it's not my job. It's not my intention here to be political. If you ask me outside of this context, I'll be happy to share you with what I believe, because what I believe is based on God. It's not based on a person or ideology when it comes to a political platform. but it is based on what I have learned through my study of Scripture, and through my communication with God. And so I'll share those with you outside of this context, outside of this venue, but it's not my desire inside of this, because I want us to really focus on what does this mean for us. And I think this chapter 13 of the book of First Corinthians, Paul's letter to Corinth, is very appropriate, very is timely for this amount for this season that we're in. So we're going to dive into that. I want to give you just kind of an introduction today. We're not going to dive into necessarily First Corinthians 13 per se, exactly the whole chapter. We're going to look at it section by section. I'm not even going to take really the time to do a study on Paul and his writing here, because we've looked at some of that. When we looked at Philippians, we went through the book of Acts. So you can go back and listen to that stuff. And we talked a lot about his visits to the churches in Asia Minor and then the Greek Peninsula there, where Corinth was. But I don't want that to be the focus of our study here. Go back and listen to that if you need to, or if you desire to, because I spent a lot of time on those different aspects of that when we were going through the book of Acts. But right now, I just want to focus on just kind of the context that we're in, the contemporary context that we're in, so that we can learn more about how that we need to help fix this. Because you have, given the, let's just jump right into it. We live in a day and time that is, it seems that it seems that it can't get any worse. I know that for me, as a husband, as a father to four girls, with one of them being married, and so our family has, of course, expanded. You start thinking about generations that come to follow. I know that I've listened to my parents and my grandparents when my grandparents were alive. You always heard how things just get worse and worse. And there is some validity in that. There is some truth in that. That we are getting farther and farther away from when the Bible was written. I don't know as if I don't believe we're in a time that all was lost. We are getting closer and closer to Jesus coming back, and there's no doubt about that, just by the sheer fact that we're one day closer every day that clicks away of Jesus coming back. And it does seem that the culture in which we live in, that things are getting harder. It's harder sometimes to practice your faith. It's hard to share your faith sometimes because of ridicule and whatever kind of pressure you may be getting from outside forces. And so one of the things that we are in, if you're listening to this as I'm doing it, we're in the middle of a huge, probably, not to be over dramatic, but it's probably the most, or one of the most important elections that we have in our country. And again, I'm not talking about side versus side here, or ideology versus ideology, or platform. I just want to focus on facts, and I just want to focus on what we are doing as Christians and as the church. But we are in a very a hyper polar political season. The older I get, I've noticed, and I'm almost about to be 49 years old. So I'm not as old as some, but I am older than some. So I'm kind of right there in the middle. I've seen a lot of elections come and go, and I've seen a lot of our country come and go. It does seem that we are more polarized now, depending upon if you choose to pick or follow a particular political party or a particular candidate. There's all kinds of polarizations, and there seems to be a greater divide now on what we believe. And even as I am recording this, just yesterday, and this will tell you kind of when this was recorded, that we had a shooting attempt on the former President Trump, and that was yesterday. This was the second one. He had that a couple months ago. We are right coming off of the end. It's still kind of fresh that there was another school shooting, really not far from where we are here in the upstate of South Carolina. So that's kind of getting close. These things aren't new. Okay, these things have been happening for a while. As a matter of fact, there have been 400, according to the Washington Post, there's been 416 school shootings since 1999, which was when the first really big one happened at Columbine High School. And I can remember when that happened because I was actually in seminary at that time. So yes, it terrifies me. It terrifies me every day. Just last week, we had all kinds of threats about what could happen, what might happen, what is being threatened to happen, all that kind of stuff. Okay, that kind of stuff happens. And yes, I am a big tough guy, and I believe in God. I believe that no matter what happens, that God's in control. But there's a part of me that worries because I also have things that are not in control. I'm not in control of. If someone, tries to harm me or harm my wife or harm my children, that scares me because I'm no longer in control of that. And it scares me the fact that I can't control that. And sometimes it's very difficult for me to let go, even that, and trust that they'll be protected no matter what, whether something happens to them or me or whatever. It doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because I believe in Jesus, and I believe that my last breath here will be my first breath when it comes to being in heaven with Him. But it doesn't mean that I want it to end right now. Okay, and I don't want to belittle that. There have been people that have lost family members because of these senseless acts of violence. There's been children that have been harmed. There's been children that are going through some very difficult times emotionally trying to deal with this. We have adults in our building. I teach, right? I teach in a high school. And it's been a very big topic of concern about how do we deal with these things and how do we fix these things. And of course, here's a big political thing. And again, I'm not being political here. I just want to point out we have a side that believes it is, the cause is the amount of guns that we have, and we need to get rid of those, or we need to severely limit or ban those types of guns. We have another side that believes the opposite way, that that's not the way to do it. Again, I'm not here to sway you politically one way or the other. That's not my job here. But my job here is to show you that there's no amount of legislation, there's nothing really that our country can do. There's no laws that can be made. There's not enough police force. There's not enough security. There's not enough resource officers in school to 100% do away with these things unless we take a drastic step as believers. And that's what this study is going to be about. How can we fix these things? Let me just give you an example here about what I'm talking about, because this was the very first act of violence that's recorded. And what we'll talk about next session is we'll expound upon this. But in Genesis 4, we read that Cain killed his brother Abel. and again, in this situation, there's no rifles, there's no AR-40, whatever, whatever the numbers are, and I don't even know because I don't own one. Doesn't matter. There wasn't a knife here, there wasn't a bomb, there wasn't anything. It just says you rose up and killed him. Okay, so there's always been this problem of violence since then. Now, what does it mean? Well, I believe that there are two emotions that control the way that we act. And I think it's not oversimplifying it to break it down to two. I think there's love and there's hate. Okay, we read about, and we'll talk about this later, about how God is love. Okay, love is not God. Don't flip that around, because you can't define that. You can't define somebody else by saying is God. God is love. When God created, he had all these abundant love for us. And again, we'll look into this deeper next session when we talk about kind of where it all began. But God's intention from the very beginning was love. He created a place where man could be. He saw that it wasn't good for man to be by himself, so he created a woman, Eve, for Adam. And they had it perfect. It was a love situation, not that erotic love that we automatically think. And that's one of the problems that we have in our English language. Is there's not an appropriate word that we translate for love other than love. Now we'll look at the Greek, and we'll talk about that when we talk about 1 Corinthians 13, about the differences in that kind of love. But let me just give you an example. Okay, I can say that I love my wife. I love Amia. I love her with all my heart. I love being with her. I love spending time with her. I love doing things for her. I love doing things with her. And I can only use the word love. But I also can say, I love hamburger. I love to go eat a biscuit. Not good for me, but I love to go eat a biscuit. You see, that's the problem, because we have these same words for that same thought, but it's different. I don't love a hamburger. I don't love pizza. I don't love chicken nuggets or whatever you want to put in there. I don't love that the same way I love my wife. And that's part of our understanding. If you talk to a group of kids, if I pull a group of kids even right now in the middle school, and I said, I want you to spend time loving these four people. If I pulled four kids, two boys and two girls, and I said, I want you to love each other. Well, their first automatic thought is going to that erotic love, that eros love, because they're a teenager. That's exactly where their mind will go. Their mind is not going to agape love, which is what 1 Corinthians 13, a spoiler alert, is going to translate to, or is translated from. Okay, so we're not teaching love in the way that we need to. And that's really what I want to talk about. Okay, there's all kinds of social and emotional needs that we all need. I work in a social emotional class. Those kids who have problems showing their emotions, showing how they can hold in their emotions in the learning environment. That doesn't mean that they have an emotional problem, because we all have emotions. God gave us all emotions. God gave us the ability to be happy, sad, joyful, upset, mad, glad, whatever the emotion is. He gave us all that. Some of us have a problem with expressing those emotions. And that's the entire point of where we want to look at about what Paul's writing to the church at Corinth. Now, what I want to do before I read that is I want to read to you the introduction to chapter 13. And then we're just going to kind of leave it for our next episode, so that we can jump really right into it. But I want to connect this so it makes sense. Again, most of the time when you read or when it's read in chapter 13, you hear this a lot in weddings. I hear it a lot in weddings. Um, and it really, in context, can fit, but they don't use it in context. They're talking about the marital love between a man and a woman, and they're talking about, unless they really go into it, it at least leads your mind to saying this is that erotic love between a man and a woman when they become husband and wife. And that's an appropriate love that is shown between in the context of a marriage. But this is agape love. This is a love between two people that has nothing to do with that erotic love. So let me read to you the first couple of verses. I don't have this on the screen, so if you want to turn to it, I'm in 1 Corinthians 13, and I'll end with 13, verse 13, but I'm not going to go that far. If I speak in the tongues of man and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith, so as to remove mountains, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have and deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. So what does all this mean? So when if you go back and you look at the previous chapter, Paul's talking about the unity of the church. He's talking about the unity of the body, that some have different gifts and some have the ability to speak and some have the prophecy of tongues. And we're not really going to get into, it's not a study on tongues here, but what he's doing is he's showing that even if I'm the greatest among whatever, that's in the body. Okay, so he transitions and said, even if I speak with the tongues of men and angels, so even if he has the ability to speak or to understand everything that man has to say, and that time I read that they thought that angels had their own language. And so to say, even if I had the ability to speak in the language of angels, which would be in their mind would be above man, he said, I can have all that, but if I don't have love, then I am basically a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If you've ever heard music or if you ever dealt with music, all music to what makes music beautiful is how it all kind of works together. But if you've ever had a bad percussionist, a bad drummer, a bad percussionist, really, if you're talking about orchestra stuff, that clangs that gong or that cymbal, it stands out, it disrupts all the other unity that is within that piece of music. Now, there have been certain pieces of music over the course of time that have been written with that specific sound. But if you go back, especially if you go back and you listen to um, um, things by, I'm just going to throw out some names by Bach or Beethoven or Handel or any of that stuff, which is that Baroque or romantic genre of time where everything is just fitting together. And even though it may not be it may derive a different emotion, everything seems to have its place, or everything is written with its own place. And so you can have cymbals hitting, you can have all kinds of things going on. But what Paul is saying, if you don't have that piece that holds everything together, which in this case, Paul's talking about love or agape. It's just going to sound bad. It doesn't fit. So right quickly before I get too far, there are four types of love that are mentioned in the New Testament. Of course, these are the Greek words, and you can go and look these things up yourself. But eros, um, storge, and philia are three different kinds of loves that we aren't really talking about today. The eros is that love between a man and a woman in the context of a marriage. Erotic is where we get that from. Storge is the second word for love. It refers to family love, mostly between a parent and a child, or really between family members in general. Philia, where we get the word for the town Philadelphia, that brotherly love and affection. It's that deep friendship and partnership that is um, uh, between humans. And then what we're looking at is agape. It's a love that doesn't change. It's a self-giving love. It's sacrificial love. It's not really a love between man and God. It's deeper than that. Is For instance, is if you go back and you look in um, the Beatitudes where Jesus is speaking in Matthew, he uses this same word. This same word agape is used over 140 times in the New Testament. You can go back and click on every one of those and look at them. But when he says love your neighbor as you love yourself, um, when he talks about, love your enemies, love those that persecute you, love those are that love. It's not that I'm going to go out and be erotic with those. That would be very inappropriate for me to do that with a neighbor or a friend. That's not the same context, but to be self-sacrificing, to do everything for them in the context of that relationship where it doesn't matter what they do. I'm always going to love them because I choose to love them. Okay, that's where we're looking at that kind of love in this context. Now, let me read the very remaining of the first two or three verses here. So as I start off in verse 1, he says, "If I speak in the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have and I deliver up my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing." So Paul is using a little bit of hyperbole here. He's using exaggeration, and forgive me, I've been working with that with the students, so those words are kind of fresh. I don't mean to sound smart because I'm not, but he's using exaggeration here. He for us, we could jump off the highest mountain and land and have that supernatural ability. Or if I had millions of dollars, if I had all the amount of money on the earth and I gave it to the poor, but I didn't have love, I have nothing. So that's where this is tying in with each other. Paul says that love, agape, is all of these things that bind us together, that glues us together. Now, at the end, again, he's putting up faith, hope, and love. So those are three big things as Christians. We have faith, we have hope, and we have love. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Now, as we continue through this study, it is the premise, it is the foundational purpose, the foundational principle of mine in this study, what I believe has been given to me, inspired to me as I'm going to write and study and present this to you. that love is the key to everything. Love is the key to making an attempt to fix it. Now, I understand that this is a fallen world and we live in a sinful world and we live in a situation where we can't fix everything. And sometimes we feel like we can't fix anything, right? It is not, in my opinion and in my study, it is not acceptable for us to say this is going to happen, these things happen. So let me stand back and protect my own and make sure I don't get involved and make sure I'm not going to get hurt or those I love get hurt. I'm just going to let all those other things happen. Okay, that's not the point here. And I think it's anti what Paul is writing to the Corinthian church. That love that Paul is writing about, and we will look at phrase by phrase, verse by verse, means that we go out and we serve God by serving others, by loving others. And I think that's the key to all of this. Again, I don't think there's any amount of legislation, that's not amount of laws or judges, or it doesn't matter ultimately. See, because again, we're in this hyper political season. And if you ask me what I believe, it's going to, what I believe is going to lean a certain way. But what I'm also going to tell you is I don't put my faith and my hope and my trust in a politician. I don't put my hope and faith and trust in a Supreme Court justice. I don't. You can use this same study that we're doing in any hyper political thing. I don't want to leave you with a big thought, but I'm going to just throw out there's all kinds of things. There's right to life is one of those big things. And there's no amount of legislation that can help it, that can secure it. It's all about changing those hearts one at a time. And that's what I hope that we can do in this study. So that being said, we're going to end it for this one. I hope that made sense. I hope you'll join us the next time that we come together. If you have any questions, concerns, any comments, please leave those. Please email or message me, and I'll address those as best as I can. That being said, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.